Summer means longer days and sometimes longer weekends. Make the most of yours with Memorial Day savings now at the Home Depot. In-store, online, store-wide. Get grilling and saving with a 5-burner Next Grill for only $199. Regularly $249. Save on everything from mulch to mowers. Ready, set, summer. Memorial Day savings. Here now, only at the Home Depot. How doers get more done while supplies last.
Introducing a brand new line of Flex Power Tools exclusively at Lowe's. A top pick for pros on the Lowe's list for innovation, this high-performance power tool line has everything a pro like you needs. Industry-leading battery technology delivering 20% more power, a longer runtime, and faster charging too. Shop in-store or online at Lowe's.com. Lowe's, the new home for pros. Versus National Home Centers for Flex 24-volt. Flex 24-volt batteries compared to 18-volt 20 max batteries utilizing the same cells. U.S. only.
Hello there. It is Eric Erickson here. Glad to have you with me. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. If you want to join me, my goodness gracious, it is, I can't remember the last time this has happened. I actually tried. I went into the history books this morning, and I can't find it. Other than just the one-off coverage of Marco Rubio and his bottle of water that turned into a joke that was buzzed about. I really cannot remember, and I can't find the last time a response of the opposition party generated more coverage than the sitting president's joint address to Congress. It's simply, I can't find that it has happened. Maybe it has, but it doesn't appear to be there, and that's remarkable. Tim Scott's response to Joe Biden's joint address to Congress is dominating the news coverage today. Tim Scott said something that people just don't seem to want to hear. I want to go back to Scott's speech. It's this in particular that has really enraged the left.
Also abandoning principles he's held for decades. Now he says your tax dollars should fund abortions. He's laying groundwork to pack the Supreme Court. This is not common ground. Nowhere do we need common ground more desperately than in our discussions of race. I have experienced the pain of discrimination. I know what it feels like to be pulled over for no reason, to be followed around the store while I'm shopping. I remember every morning at the kitchen table, my grandfather would open the newspaper and read it, I thought. But later I realized he had never learned to read it. He just wanted to set the right example. I've also experienced a different kind of intolerance. I get called Uncle Tom and the N-word by progressives, by liberals. Just last week, a national newspaper suggested my family's poverty was actually privilege because a relative owned land generations before my time. Believe me, I know firsthand our healing is not finished. In 2015, after the shooting of Walter Scott, I wrote a bill to fund body cameras. Last year, after the deaths of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, I built an even bigger police reform proposal, but my Democratic colleagues blocked it. I extended an olive branch. I offered amendments, but Democrats used a filibuster to block the debate from even happening. My friends across the aisle seemed to want the issue more than they wanted a solution. But I'm still working. I'm hopeful that this will be different.
Scott said the United States is not a racist nation, and that redemption can be found with sin, not condemnation. He acknowledged the nation's original sin being slavery, but noted the progress we have made moving beyond it. And the left is incensed. They are hopping mad with Tim Scott today. They do not like that he said it. They do not like that he believes it. They do not like that he pointed this stuff out. They really, really are incensed. And in so being, what is coming out of this is a swift condemnation from the left of Tim Scott declaring us not a racist nation. Joy Behar on The View, of course, is out of the gate lecturing Tim Scott that we're not a racist nation. Well, actually, what about systemic racism? She wants us to believe this is a real problem. You've got Ibram Kendi, Ibram Kendi, the how to be an anti-racist or whatever. He is out calling Tim Scott a racist. Now, let me put this in perspective for you. Tim Scott's grandfather, because white people in the South during the Jim Crow era prior to the Civil War were pressuring black landowners to surrender their farms, making it difficult for them to make money on their farms. Tim Scott's grandfather dropped out of elementary school in 3rd grade, never learned to read or write, and had to go tend to the family farm with his family to save it from the white people of South Carolina in pre-World War II South Carolina. The Washington Post posited that generations before, because the black folks in Scott's family had owned the land, clearly he was more privileged than he wanted to believe. And now they're lecturing Tim Scott on racism. They're lecturing a black man from South Carolina on racism. I want to let's talk about Ibram Kendi for a moment, please. Ibram Kendi is all the rage these days among the rich white elite. They love Ibram Kendi because he tells them exactly what they want to hear. Ibram Kendi believes that the nation is inherently racist. He believes that the cure is to reverse the discrimination. He also believes that if you ask why does racial inequality exist, it's a racist question. It is, along with Robin DiAngelo in her White Fragility book, it is it's a message that tells rich white people what they want to hear. Charles Lehman, writing over at the Washington Free Beacon, has this: in 2019, as young journalists agitated for their newsrooms to pivot towards social justice, Dr. Ibram Kendi's Research Center at American University secured a $50,000 grant from the Ford Foundation to establish a racial reporting guidebook to help the media hew to Kendi's anti-racist principles. The school touted the grant as one of its 2019 achievements, and Kendi's academic perch at AU, the Anti-Racist Research and Policy Center, proudly advertised it on their website. But neither the guidebook nor the symposium ever materialized. Further details were promised well into 2020. The project's mysterious disappearance is but one instance in which Kendi and colleagues' big promises never came to fruition. Kendi has become liberal America's guiding light on the academic study of racism. He's written 3 best-selling books, published op-eds in the New York Times and Washington Post, and been named a contributor to The Atlantic and CBS News. But the glitzy academic center at which he roosted for much of that time produced no real academic research. Instead, it hawked a swanky gala honoring liberals, from George and Amal Clooney to Barack and Michelle Obama, as well as conversations with people such as Black Panther's founder Bobby Seale. And it ran an anti-racist confessions board on which students and administrators were encouraged to overcome the denial that characterizes racism by confessing the details of their journey to being anti-racist. The Racial Reporting Guidebook isn't the only project that never materialized. Another $200,000 Ford Foundation grant for a promised national anti-bigotry project exists entirely on paper. Other projects Kendi promised, policy teams, the world's largest library of data and racial inequality, and classes for American University students, did not come to fruition before his departure this summer for the new Center for Anti-Racist Research at Boston University. A spokeswoman for the Anti-Racist Research and Policy Center told the Washington Free Beacon, academic output is not the center's only purpose. And then there's this from Christy Clark. A Boston University professor said the question, why does racial inequality exist, is itself racist. Ibram Kendi, who holds a prestigious humanities professorship once held by Holocaust survivor Eli Wiesel, made the remark Tuesday at a Harvard seminar on anti-racist research. Kendi said that studying the impact of minority behavior on racial disparities is regressive, akin to wondering if the world is round in 2020. Instead, anti-racist researchers should ask, how can we eliminate racial inequality and injustice? The professor also linked anti-racism to anti-capitalism, implying that anti-racist scholarship would be intrinsically anti-capitalist. Let me ask you a question. If Ibram Kendi did not believe the United States is a racist nation, would the white people in charge of the Atlantic and the New York Times and the university systems and the like, would they give him his perch? Would the white people in charge of CBS News give Ibram Kendi a contributorship if Ibram Kendi believed that the nation wasn't racist? No, of course they wouldn't. His existence is dedicated to the idea that we are a racist nation, and the way to be anti-racist is to engage in reverse racism so that white people know what it feels like. So here comes Tim Scott, a black man from South Carolina, a black man from the Deep South. Kendi, by the way, was born in New York. Tim Scott was born outside of Charleston, South Carolina. So Tim Scott, the man who was born in the Deep South post-Confederacy, believes the nation is not racist, and Ibram Kendi, who was born in New York City, Jamaica, New York to be precise, believes the nation is racist. Maybe it's that New York is racist and South Carolina isn't. Maybe, possibly. I don't know. I mean, just asking questions. That's what they do, isn't it? Tim Scott has stepped on their narrative. Tim Scott, listen to this. This is from the Washington Post. Senator Tim Scott's comments on race ignite a fiery debate. Republicans rallied Thursday behind comments on race made by Senator Tim Scott as part of his response to President Biden's address to Congress, embracing what they hoped was an effective message in the ongoing debate over the role of racism in America that has sometimes left them struggling to articulate a clear position. Scott, delivering the official Republican response Wednesday, suggested that liberals are using race as a political weapon, defining all white people as oppressors and seeking to use the language of civil rights to rig elections. Hear me clearly, America is not a racist country, Scott, the only black Republican in the Senate, said in the televised rebuttal. It's backward to fight discrimination with different types of discrimination, and it's wrong to try to use our painful past to dishonestly shut down debates in the present. Democrats generally treated Scott's words with caution, but many black activists who publicly criticized Scott into the wee hours Thursday morning deemed him the latest in a long line of black apologists who give political and racial cover to white grievance. You mean Tim Scott, the guy who actually tried a police reform bill that the Democrats used the filibuster, the racist Jim Crow era filibuster, the Democrats used it to stop a bill on police reform named after George Floyd because they want the issue. They don't want the solution. Rich white people in this country who are elite and secular have traded God for government. Every religion has an original sin narrative. And the rich white secular elite of this country, their original sin narrative is in 1619, white people brought slaves to the shore, polluting the soil itself. Racism is everywhere. And the only way to purge it is to purge white people from power as payback, to make the oppressor the oppressed. It's a reverse racism. They give seats at the table and they give clout to their high priests and prophets who tell them what they want to hear. Scott's got to be crucified as a heretic like the Pharisees going after Jesus because he's telling them the truth and they don't want to hear it because they make a whole lot of money by perpetuating the narrative that this country is a racist nation. I mean, Scott said in his speech, there is racism. This nation is not racist, and they're livid with him. But here's the thing. Most Americans agree with Tim Scott. And in the insane pushback from the media against Tim Scott, what they're doing is elevating his message and their contrast. Who do you think the American people are going to vote for? Who do you think the American people are going to side with? The man who says, yes, we've got problems, but we're a good people? Or the rich white elite who want nothing to do with Americans, who believe we're a terrible country and shame on us and we should engage in reverse discrimination? Who do you think people are really going to side with? Their outrage at Tim Scott, allowing his message to overshadow Joe Biden's address to Congress, helps Tim Scott and the Republicans and Donald Trump. Hi there, it is Eric Erickson here. Friends, Mother's Day. It is a week from this Sunday. Warning, 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 Mother's Day. It's coming up. Have you figured out what you are doing? Huh? Have you figured it out? What are you going to do? You need to go to omahasteaks.com. You need to put Georgia in the search bar. You need to get your mom the Let's Go Grill package. You can make her steak. You can make her chicken. You can get 12 burgers, have the family grill out. You get almost 4 pounds of burgers for free. You know what you can do with the chicken breast? You're going to get chicken breast in this package. Crush up cornflakes. Put them in a big gallon Ziploc bag. Crush them up. Take some butter, like a stick of butter, and then you cover it in Cajun seasoning like Tony Chachere's. Melt it. And then you dip the chicken in the butter, and then you roll the chicken in the cornflakes, and then you put it in a sprayed baking dish, and you put it in the oven for 50 minutes at 350. And you get cornflake chicken. My wife loves it. I've been making this since I was like 8 years old. You pour the excess butter and spices on top before you put it in the oven. You've got enough chicken breasts with this Omaha steak package to be able to do that. It's an easy meal. You put the chicken in the melted butter, Cajun seasoning, then the crushed cornflakes in the oven, 350 for 50 minutes. Pour the excess butter on top before you stick it in the oven. It's great. You can do that with this, or you can grill out the burgers. You got 12 free burgers from Omaha Steaks, or you get steak, or you get pork chops, and you get caramel apple tartlets. Go to omahasteaks.com, put Georgia in the search bar. You'll get this. You'll get $20 off your first order. You'll save over 45% total, and you get 12 burgers, almost 4 pounds of hamburgers for free. omahasteaks.com. Democratic despair is growing over the election. Ron Brownstein is writing in the Atlantic, can Democrats avoid a wipeout in 2020? Biden's plan, go big or go home. The good news for Democrats who watched Joe Biden unveil a historically ambitious agenda is that the newly elected presidents have almost always passed some version of their core economic plan, particularly when their party controls both congressional chambers, as Biden does now. The bad news, voters have almost always punished the president's party in the next midterm election anyway. The last 2 times Democrats had unified control, with Bill Clinton in 93 and Barack Obama in 2009, they endured especially resounding repudiations in the midterms, which cost Clinton his majority in both chambers and Obama the loss of the House. The scale of the agenda Biden laid out underscores Democrat convictions that their best chance to avoid that fate again in 2022 is to go big with their proposals. Counting the coronavirus stimulus plan approved earlier this year, Biden has now proposed more than $5 trillion in new spending initiatives over the next decade, far more than Clinton or Obama ever offered, to be partly paid for by tax increases on corporations and affluent families. On cultural and social issues, Democrats are pursuing a much more ambitious lineup than Clinton and Obama did. Biden is endorsing measures related to a panoramic array of liberal priorities, including election reform, police accountability, citizenship for young undocumented immigrants, statehood for Washington, D.C., alphabet gang rights, and gun control. Go big or go home, but here's the problem. Well, actually, let me read you this paragraph first, because this one's funny. The bolder plan from Biden and congressional Democrats is so all-encompassing that historians are legitimately comparing it to the two titanic 20th century programs that transformed government's role in American society. The New Deal under FDR in the 1930s and the Great Society under LBJ in the 1960s. This is definitively FDR and Johnson territory, especially in the current age of polarization where so little gets done. They really are embracing the FDR Lyndon Johnson narrative. And what happened? FDR hung on because of a global war. Lyndon Johnson was driven from office. And here's the other thing. If you actually pay attention to what happened in 2020, there wasn't a mandate. There was a repudiation of Donald Trump's behavior and no mandate. Republicans came within 5 seats of taking back the House. Republicans gained seats nationwide in state legislatures. The idea that somehow this is a major win for the voters are going to reject this. It's pretty obvious that's coming. Oh my gosh, y'all! There's this video I just retweeted it on Twitter. This group of young men pull up in a van to try to carjack a woman filling her gas up or trying to rob her or something. They pull up at the gas pump, block her car. She's filling up the gas. She pulls the gas nozzle out of the car and starts hosing them down with gasoline, and they take off. Well played, lady. Well played. My goodness gracious. All right. The phone number here, if you want to be a part of the program, 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. I'm already getting lit on fire by progressives for pointing out that Kendi gets a seat at the rich, white, elite people's table because he's telling them what they want to hear, and clearly I'm racist for pointing that out. No, it's actually true. If Ibram Kendi did not believe America wasn't racist, Ibram Kendi would not be getting a seat at the rich white people's table. He wouldn't. And you can call me a racist for pointing out that basic fact, but it's true. Very much like, at Mercer University, you had the professor who wrote the Lord help me hate help me hate white people. And it's academic freedom for her. But I can assure you, you and I both know, if it was a white professor, there would be no equality. Nope, no equality there. No academic freedom there. That person would be run off campus. You get to tell the rich elite what they want to hear, and you get a seat at the table, and you get to make a lot of money off of them. That's what happens. It's the same way that when a conservative turns on conservatives, when a Republican turns on Republicans, they get on television all the freaking time. Look at the various people who get on television all the time now, the Republicans who hate the Republican Party. It's actually kind of remarkable to me to this day that in 2016, I didn't support the president. I said, character counts. I'm not going to do it. I was on TV all the time. In fact, when I decided to leave Fox, I didn't want to go back. They didn't want to keep me. I did more television hits in the year after leaving Fox than I had done in 3 years as a paid contributor at Fox. Was doing Meet the Press, was doing CNN. I was actually even occasionally still doing Fox. In fact, I did more Fox News after not being on the payroll than when I was on the payroll. It's kind of bizarre. I was doing HBO, all the stuff. And then I said I was voting Donald Trump in 2020. Every single pre-existing network hit I had got canceled. Every single one. Except HBO. To Bill Maher and HBO's credit, they have continued to have me back fairly regularly. But no more Meet the Press. No more CNN. No more any of that after saying that I would support the president in 2020. It's remarkable. You get a seat at the table when you tell the white elite what they want to hear in this country. It's like this radio program. I have ambitions of expanding this program outside of Georgia. We are slowly doing it. We will be moving our time slot, among other things, in a while. More news on that as soon as I can talk to you about it. The number of people in the upper echelons of syndicated talk radio in this country who tell me I have to give up talking about faith, that I can't talk about the transgender issue, that I can't talk to you as a Christian when I do that because it won't translate. What they mean is they don't like it. It's actually, now, don't worry, I'll still talk about that stuff, and maybe it'll kill me. Maybe it'll prevent my growth in talk radio, but somebody's got to talk about it because nobody else is, and I guess I kind of know why that's the case. But I'm willing to tell you what needs to be said and not just tell you the things that I'm allowed to tell you. Well, maybe we'll have a code word when I get to the point where I can't talk about that stuff because they threaten to fire me. I'll have a code word. All right, we need to move on to Joe Biden's speech. We've talked about Tim Scott's speech. This is impressive to me. Joe Biden had a terrible performance. You know, CBS News rushed out a poll of Joe Biden's coverage and said 85% of Americans like Joe Biden's speech. Well, it turns out nobody watched it, so how the heck do they know? So it turns out initially, Joe Biden's live coverage was no better than the Oscars. But when you take in the people who watched it across platforms, it rose to 26.9 million people. Donald Trump's first address to the United States Congress garnered 47.7 million people. Joe Biden got 26.9 million people. Nielsen reported the bulk of Biden's audience were 55 and older. The figure include out-of-home viewings. Starting at around 9:10 p.m. Eastern, the just over 1 hour speech aired live on ABC, CBS, NBC, Fox, Telemundo, Univision, PBS, CNBC, CNN, CNN Espanol, Fox Business Network, Fox News Channel, MSNBC, Newsmax, News Nation, and Newsy. And it was a major drop-off, down 47% from Donald Trump's first speech. It was abysmally watched. No one paid attention. But CBS News rushed out their poll and said 85% of Americans like what they heard. That's not the case, because when you delve into the fine print, they interviewed like 1,000 people. It was overwhelmingly Democrats who they surveyed, and it was people who watched the speech. So they interviewed basically 1,000 people who watched the speech. Overwhelmingly, they were Democrats, and they liked the speech. Surprise, news shock, Democrats liked Joe Biden's speech. But, you know, not all the Democrats did. Some of the Democrats were actually grumbling that he didn't do more to talk about the border. What's his name? Mark Kelly from Arizona is out critical of the president for not dealing with it. And then there's this from Joe Manchin. The left is mad. The left will never not be mad at Joe Manchin for refusing to scuttle the filibuster. If he opens his mouth and says hello, they get mad at him at this point.
Are you concerned about this push for a more expansive government?
Oh, most certainly. Yeah, I am. But I want to see the details, as we talked before. But we can't overreach to the point to where we stymie investments. We stymie basically growth for 2022, 23, 24, and on. So we're going to look at all that.
And when you look at the overall price tag of all these proposals,
It's a lot. It's a lot.
I mean,
we're talking trillions and trillions of dollars. Here's the thing. We've got $1.9 trillion that hasn't gone out the door yet. We just passed American Rescue Plan.
And it needs to be fully paid for.
We need to pay for it. We do. I mean, we're at $28.5 trillion, almost $28.25 trillion. Now, that's not sustainable. In anybody's book, it's not sustainable.
I want to ask you, is that there's a push to do it by Democratic votes alone, by reconciliation?
I'm not for that. I've never been for that, and I've told them I'm not for that. Mm-hmm. The bottom line is this place has got to have a chance to work.
So no reconciliation, and it's going to have to be paid for. You've got some Democrats who want deficit spending, essentially trying to make the gamble that if they spend now, the economy will revive. But wait, there's more. Let me go over to the Wall Street Journal for this. Stimulus check drove record rise in household income. Higher income spending and savings are expected to help power a fast economic recovery. Household income rose at a record pace of 21.1% in March as federal stimulus checks help fuel an economic revival that's poised to endure with an easing pandemic. The surge in income last month was the largest monthly increase for government records, tracing back to 1959, reflecting $1,400 stimulus checks and other government aid included in a $1.9 trillion fiscal relief package signed into law in March. Spending was up sharply, increased 4.2%. This was the steepest month-over-month increase since last summer. Americans will have cash to spend as the economy reopens more in the coming months. The personal savings rate rose to 27.6% from 13.9%. In March, consumers increased spending on goods by 8.1%, with a large chunk of that on big-ticket items. Spending on services advanced only a modest 2.2%. Question: if the economy is roaring back to life thanks to the stimulus checks, why do we need all the other big government spending? If the economy is already coming back to life, why do we need another $5 trillion in spending from the federal government? They don't seem to have an answer to that. They just want more spending. And this goes back to Ron Brownstein's point that this is about 2022. It's not about what the economy needs. It's not about what the American people need. It's about throwing money at the public, hoping they will reward Democrats with extended control in Washington. Now, the odds are that's not going to happen because of redistricting. When you go to, for example, let's take the 2010 election cycle. The Republicans were able to lock in their gains in 2010, and then by 2012 had laid out charted a course to redistricting that locked in their control of the House and ultimately got them back into the Senate by 2014. The Democrats right now, they're on the losing end of redistricting again. The Republicans will be able, they don't have the House right now, but they will redraw the lines. They will control a majority of the lines. They should be able to take back the Congress, both on lines drawn. Remember that there are right now 5 seats. I'm sorry, 5 seats that separate the Republicans from controlling the House. They will be able to, Texas has 2 seats. Florida's getting a seat. North Carolina is getting a seat. They'll be able to pick up some seats. And they're going to draw those lines in a majority of states with a majority of Republican governors so they don't have to worry about veto threats. And they'll pick up the House. To the extent the Democrats are throwing money at things, it's to mitigate stuff, but they've got their own problems. Biden came to Georgia yesterday, which was remarkable because the man urged Major League Baseball to boycott the state, and then he comes in and pretends that he's some sort of savior for Georgia, and yet he was interrupted by a heckler. The heckler is objecting to private-run prisons, and another protester was protesting the border situation. And Biden, of course, is trying to make blanket promises that he's going to solve all the problems and fix the border situation, and probably isn't going to. It's actually kind of a remarkable turnaround for the Biden team is basically out there claiming that the Trump administration left them nothing to work with at the border, which isn't true. It simply is not true. The Trump team left them a lot to work with at the border, but they themselves chose to ignore it. They themselves chose to abandon the border situation and try to exacerbate the problem. I mean, here's Joe Biden talking last night on he's on. He's on the Today Show and his trot out of his agenda. Listen to this.
Before you took office in January, you laid out 4 crises that demanded urgent action. The pandemic was obviously one of them. The economic fallout as a result of the pandemic was one of them. Climate change and racial inequality. Immigration was not one of the crises that demanded urgent action in January. Does it demand urgent action now? Is what's happening at the southern border, is it a crisis?
It is getting urgent action now. For example, a month ago, we had thousands of young kids in custody in places they shouldn't be, and controlled by the Border Patrol. We have now cut that down dramatically. Here's what happened, Craig. The failure to have a real transition, the 2 departments that didn't give us access to virtually anything were the Immigration and the Defense Department. So we didn't find out they had fired a whole lot of people, that they were understaffed considerably.
But in April alone, Mr. President, 170,000 people, migrants, apprehended at the border. It's a 20-year record. There are 22,000 unaccompanied children in our country right now. That's a record. That sounds to most folks like a crisis.
Well, look, it's way down now. We've now gotten control. For example, they didn't plan for, which it comes every year, this flow, whether it's 22,000 or 10,000. They didn't have the beds that were available. They didn't plan for the overflow. They didn't plan for the Department of Health and Human Services to have places to take the kid from the Border Patrol and put them in beds where there was security and there were people that could take care of them. So there's a significant change right now, significant change in the circumstance for children coming to and at the border.
Now, I got to comment on this. Do you know why the Trump administration didn't have the beds and all the stuff there? Do you know why they were understaffed? Do you know why they didn't have the facilities? Because the kids weren't coming. Joe Biden says that they were underfurnished, understaffed. It's because the kids weren't coming, because the Trump administration policy was to require that everybody stay south of the border. If you were coming seeking refugee status, you had to stay south of the border. Biden changed that, and it caused an overflow. This isn't a Trump-created problem. This is a Biden-created problem, and the man who claims he's going to be always candid and honest can't be honest about it. He created the problem. Hi there, it is Eric Erickson. The phone number, you want to be on the show, 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Let's talk about Scientology, shall we? Have you seen this documentary? I saw this link online. Ex-members offer a rare look at the organization's multiple studios and allege that Scientology used the audition room, an audition process, to recruit outside actors. It's an in-house film, and no one's going to see it. 10 years ago this month, the Church of Scientology purchased Hollywood's historic KCET lot in Los Feliz, which it rebranded as Scientology Media Productions. It is from here that it operates the Scientology Network, which launched March 12, 2018, with a video message from leader David Miscavige. Appearing in a fitted blue suit inside a modern church building, Miscavige promised the TV studio would show you inside Scientology who we are, what Scientology is, and what Scientology can do. We're not here to preach to you, to convince you, or to convert you. No, we simply want to show you. According to sources, however, proselytizing is exactly what the network is intended to do. Meanwhile, over the last 2 decades, Scientology has also used its audition process for in-house films to reach out to new recruits, as well as hosting acting seminars to draw in prospective members. Through a spokesperson, the Church of Scientology denies these characterizations. The Scientology Network, whose website says it's accessible to more than 20 million households throughout the U.S., comprises 9 unscripted series, including Meet a Scientologist and Destination Scientology, a documentary showcase and in-house films ranging from The Truth About Drugs to The Way to Happiness that reflect the church's dogma. It's available on DirecTV and via Roku, Apple TV, Amazon, and Google Chromecast, and airs in 17 languages. Scientology Media Productions sits 5 blocks down Sunset Boulevard from the main Church of Scientology International, LA. KCET sold the property to the church in April 2011 for $45 million, according to the LA Times, which was adjusted to $28.8 million when the local TV station temporarily leased back space before finding a new location. The church reportedly spent $50 million restoring the lot to its 1920s look and updated the facilities. All right, here's the thing. We all know Scientology is a cult, correct? I mean, there's no real disagreement here that Scientology is a cult. And it's nice that more and more members of the media and press continue to explore and expose Scientology and the abusiveness of Scientology. But I got a question. When are we ever going to get answers as to how Scientology got its tax-exempt status? Because rumors have abounded for years that Scientology had a Scientology IRS agent. And that's how they got it. The documentary evidence of abuse are overwhelming, and the Scientologists, it seems like, are doing everything they can to try to legitimize themselves. I got a buddy of mine who was telling me in Washington now, Scientology has a lobbyist, and anytime there is anything progressive reforms, criminal justice reforms, and things like that, the Scientology lobbyist wants to sign on to give credibility to Scientology in Washington, D.C. as a legitimate organization. They're hiring lobbyists, signing on to legislation, claiming that they're legit. And so this buddy of mine was telling me there's a rush in Washington to try to get stuff done and out the door with signed letters and petitions before the Scientology lobbyist finds out about it. But there should be an investigation, Washington. The more we know about this organization and how it got its tax-exempt status, it's not a religion, it's a cult, and there really needs to be some level of investigation into what the heck is going on out there as they continue to expand their media empire now to indoctrinate more people and steal more money from people. Hello and welcome. It is Eric Erickson here. The phone number, it is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425, and I should note, yes, my friends, yes. It's Friday. Hallelujah. Praise the Lord. The phone lines are open. All right. Let's delve into something related. Well, you know what? First, I'm going to start with this. I actually just got this. This is from a letter from the Catholic League to Rob Manfred, the Commissioner of Baseball. Actually, you know what? Hold on. I want to say something else first. I went to a Braves game Monday night. And, you know, I put on Instagram pictures, and there are a few people saying, well, I'm not going to go to any baseball games because of what they did. And that's fine. But I've also gotten comments from people. We've gotten phone calls. I've gotten emails from people who are mad at me for going to a Braves game. I am a Cubs fan. Now listen, I root for the Braves because I'm in Georgia. I like the Braves. A couple of the Braves, they will go nameless for these purposes. A couple of the Braves are listeners to this program. And they're very nice guys. They're a good team, and I like the Braves, but I'm a longtime Cubs fan. And the reason, it's kind of weird, having a native of Louisiana who grew up in Dubai. One of my best friends growing up in Dubai was from Chicago and was a massive Chicago Bulls in the Jordan days, and a Cubs fan, the poor Cubs. The one team you always rooted for, knowing they were never going to go to the World Series, and then they did. And I've been very fortunate over the years now. I know the family that owns the Cubs, very nice people, the Ricketts, and they've given me some great seats. They let me take my dad up a couple of years ago, sat right next to the dugout. It was fantastic. I love the Cubs, and I like the Braves, and I went to the game, the Cubs and the Braves. I didn't care who won. I was glad to be there. I was with a buddy of mine, had a beer or four, and had some good nachos, had a good time, had a good conversation, and I'm totally okay if you don't want to go. But the fact that there are some people now who think that I'm bad because I went, y'all, this ain't religion. Live your life. It's like I think you should get the vaccine, but I'm not going to bully you into getting the vaccine. I don't care. If you get COVID, okay. You took the risk. You made the assessment. I'm going to go live my life now. I got the vaccine. I'm not going to wear a mask anymore. And I'm going to go to a Braves game. And if you don't like that I went to a Braves game, well, that's on you. That's not on me. I couldn't care less. I don't really drink Coke products anymore. I like Dr. Pepper. And yes, Coca-Cola is the distributor for Dr. Pepper in Georgia, where I am. But I'm not going to boycott Dr. Pepper because they have a tangential business relationship with Coke. But I don't have to drink Coke. I'm not going to give up flying Delta because Delta's the best airline, and I've got 600,000 frequent flyer miles, and I can go wherever I want without having to pay anything because of my vast array of miles. If you want to boycott. I don't care, but I will boycott. I will definitely go to Home Depot instead of the Lowe's to support Home Depot as the left is boycotting Home Depot. I will choose where to direct my dollars, and screw you if you think you're going to tell me where I can and cannot shop, to put it bluntly. Now, you can leave me angry messages if you want, but I'm not giving up a baseball game because Stacey Abrams and Rob Manfred decided to move the All-Star game. I mean, I'm not going to watch the All-Star game. I wasn't going to watch it anyway. I don't generally watch baseball, and I don't normally go to the games. But a buddy of mine bought me a ticket. I wanted to go. I was perfectly happy to go, and I did. And I'd do it again. The Catholic League has sent a letter to Bob Manfred. As president of the nation's largest Catholic civil rights organization, I would like to commend you for your newfound interest in policing human rights in the United States. While your objections to the voting reform law in Georgia are baseless, let's assume nonetheless that you have a genuine interest in alleged violations of human rights. However, if this is the case, why did Major League Baseball just renew its contract with Tencent, the Chinese company with close ties to the Communist Party? According to China News, the Chinese state media, the new contract will enable Major League Baseball and the Communists to expand live broadcasts and membership services. For the first time, Major League Baseball has joined hands with Oriental Pearl New Media, and it is the first time that MLB has achieved multi-platform copyright cooperation in China, allowing baseball content to over 100 million household users. Baseball will also be shown on screens in bus terminals and subways. There will be at least one game aired per day, with approximately 200 games available for live broadcast and on-demand services. You must be very proud of Major League Baseball's expansion into communist China. After all, the Chinese people need some relief from the totalitarian conditions under which they live, and this is particularly true of those who take their religion seriously. Unfortunately, their rights are being summarily abused by the government that you support. And the letter goes on from there. Good for Bill Donahue for writing that letter. I relate all of this to relate this story. Headline, Washington Post, Florida legislature approves measure that curbs mail voting and use of drop boxes. Florida's legislature on Thursday night became the latest to approve far-reaching legislation imposing new rules on voting and new penalties for those who do not follow them. Passing a measure critics said would make it harder for millions of voters to cast ballots in the Sunshine State. Governor Ron DeSantis, who named voting security one of his top legislative priorities this year, said Thursday night on Fox that he, of course, will sign the bill. Like similar bills Republicans are pushing in dozens of state legislatures across the country, the Florida measure adds hurdles to voting by mail, restricts the use of drop boxes, and prohibits any action that could influence those standing in line to vote, which voting rights advocates said is likely to discourage nonpartisan groups from offering food or water to voters as they wait in the hot Florida sun. The passage of the bill was preceded by an hour of emotional debate as black lawmakers stood up to decry a measure they said was aimed squarely at curbing the cloud of voters of color. You are making policies that are detrimental to our communities, said Angela Nixon, a Democrat, describing herself as distraught and disheartened. Both Democrats and Republicans, including DeSantis, hailed Florida's administration of the November 2020 election as a model for the nation. Former President Donald Trump won the state by more than 3 points. Nevertheless, DeSantis has said new restrictions are needed to shore up election security. So you think we led the nation, but we're trying to stay ahead of the curve to make sure these elections are well run. Democrats and voting rights activists counter that the new measure is instead aimed at making it harder for some to vote. Not really. I mean, the Republicans are already winning in Florida. Y'all, Have you noticed the lack of national news outrage? Have you noticed the lack of boycotts? Have you noticed the lack of denouncement of Texas and Florida for passing these laws? Have you noticed we're not getting what was gotten in Georgia? Why do you think that is? 2 words. Stacey Abrams. Stacey Abrams is not trying to run for governor in Florida, so she doesn't need to build up her profile over Florida. Stacey Abrams is not trying to run for governor of Texas, so she doesn't need to build up her profile there. She's running for governor of Georgia in 2022, and the Democrats in the national press are doing everything they can to help Stacey Abrams boost her profile. So Georgia gets amazing condemnation. Georgia gets amazing demands. Georgia gets amazing pressure. And Georgia gets amazing political blowback from Fortune 500 companies because Stacey Abrams is shaking them down. Stacey Abrams is demanding it. Stacey Abrams wants it. They're not getting that in these other states because Stacey Abrams has no use for those other states. She's not trying to run in those other states. It's not politically convenient for her to do. It's just remarkable that the outrage from Georgia is not being translated to these other states when, in fact, the other states are doing very similar to what Georgia did, but Stacey Abrams isn't there. This shows you the power Stacey Abrams has over the national press. And so for those of you in Georgia, I have been very intentional in the last number of weeks as we have picked up stations out of the state. For those of you listening out of state right now, if out of Georgia, this show started statewide in Georgia. We're slowly stretching across the state line into other states. But my heart's still here, and when there's relevant national news that relates to Georgia, I intend to talk about it because I live here. I care about the state. I know how many people in Georgia listen. And people in Georgia need to understand this. Republicans in Georgia are deeply divided about Brian Kemp, although less divided now than they were a few months ago. Time heals all wounds. But there is a group of people in Georgia, they're best described as the Island of Misfit Toys Republicans. They're not very good at winning, but they're very good at whining. They've never been truly competent at executing campaigns. Some of them are pay to play. Throw them a bone and they will bark however you want them to bark, wherever you want them to bark. It's just kind of this gross, corrupt contingent of Island of Misfit Toys. And they bully people. They badger people. They got no Jesus in their heart even when they throw his name around with reckless abandon. And if I'm being disparaging, it is because I really don't like a lot of these people because I find them insular and insulating. I find that they do more harm than good. I find that they're not very good at what they do, but they have an overinflated sense of ego and self. And they've decided that their way to power and to keep power is to ride Donald Trump's leg like a dog in heat. They don't care about the Republicans and they don't care about the future. They care about themselves and their access to power. Other people didn't give them attention and Donald Trump did. And so they've become his stalkers. I dated a girl once who decided that because I had shown her attention that we had to get married. Like we were dating and it became an obsessive thing. And you know, you find that sometimes with strays and people who have daddy issues and the like. You give them a little bit of attention and suddenly they're your stalker. This Island of Misfit Toys, they're kind of the same way. Donald Trump gave them some attention. And I mean, he's got their loyalty now and they're willing to burn everything down around them. so long as he gives them head pats. And so these people want to burn down the Republican Party if Brian Kemp is the Republican nominee in Georgia. And he's going to be the Republican nominee in Georgia. They put up Vernon Jones, who last year was a Democrat. This year is now a Republican. Last year opposed the fetal heartbeat legislation. This year claims to be pro-life from conception to grave. That's their fringe candidate to run against Brian Kemp. They would be perfectly happy with Stacey Abrams getting elected. These people would love it if Stacey Abrams got elected as a big middle finger to people who stood in their way. Their candidate, unfortunately, can't beat Stacey Abrams, and they're okay not beating Stacey Abrams so long as they beat Brian Kemp, because Brian Kemp to them is the enemy, Stacey Abrams is the opponent. Stacey Abrams gets all sorts of national media clout, and she will with these people as well. The media is not going after Florida, nor are they going after Texas for passing election reform measures, because Stacey Abrams does not reside there. You have these Island of Misfit Toys Republicans and the national media all trying to get Stacey Abrams elected, all to spite everyone else. And the rest of you need to pay attention, if you live in Georgia, to what's actually going on here. These people want to make Stacey Abrams happen, not because they really want her, but because they really hate Brian Kemp. Why? Because Brian Kemp refused to exceed the constitutional bounds of his office. And so for that, we all must be punished. And that's pretty pathetic. Hi there, it's Eric Erickson. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. You know, the NBA, the Major League Baseball doing their deal with the Chi-Coms. What about the NBA? Listen to this. I wonder if someone's told LeBron. The National Basketball Association sells sneakers on its online store from a Chinese company that uses cotton produced in Xinjiang, a region where China coerces Uyghur Muslims into forced labor. The NBA sells at least 2 basketball shoes made by Anta Sports, China's largest sportswear brand, which has pledged to source cotton from the region where Uyghur Muslims are used as slave labor. One of the shoes, known as the Claytheism for Golden State Warrior superstar Klay Thompson, comes in various models and runs up to $119.99. In March, the Chinese company says it has, quote, always bought and used cotton produced in China, including Xinjiang cotton, and will continue to do so. Western countries have raised concerns that cotton produced in Xinjiang, where China detains more than 1 million Uyghur Muslims in re-education camps, is tainted with forced labor. According to a December BBC report, China is forcing more than 500,000 ethnic minorities, the majority of whom are Uyghurs, to harvest cotton in Xinjiang, which produces 20% of the world's cotton and 85% of China's cotton. At least 3 NBA stars have worn the Anta brand in recent years, including Thompson, Charlotte Hornets forward Gordon Hayward, and LA Clippers guard Rajon Rondo. All 3 players have signature shoes with the company. The Warriors, Hornets, and Clippers did not respond to requests for comment. Anta's use of the region's cotton has raised concerns about the upcoming Summer Olympics in Tokyo, where the Chinese company will serve as the official uniform supplier. The International Olympic Committee told Axios this week that it has been working closely with Anta to monitor the conditions in the factories producing our goods. In the factories, but not the fields, key language. In response to reports of forced labor, the Trump administration sanctioned 11 Chinese companies last year for alleged human rights abuses against Uyghur Muslims. Many of the sanctioned companies were suppliers to American brands like Nike, Apple, Google, and Tommy Hilfiger. Facing mounting pressure, Nike reviewed its labor practices and announced it had no ties to companies using Uyghur slave labor. The NBA has not responded to comment. The NBA has chosen not to respond. Where's LeBron on this? Wonder what LeBron James's position is. Pay paging LeBron, because it's the Chinese. He doesn't care about the Chinese. It really is remarkable to watch the tone deafness of these superstar athletes who want to lecture you and me and then totally ignore what's happening where they're making a great deal of money in China because they're making money. You can't serve God and money, people. And these NBA stars have decided to serve money, and so they will turn a blind eye to outrageous abuse when it serves them. They will turn a blind eye to the persecution of Christians and Muslims in China because they're making money there. The Major League Baseball the commissioner can be outraged about Georgia's voting law and turn a blind eye to China because he's making a lot of money. This is the thing with the elite in this country. They lecture the United States on racism and like to hobnob with racist regimes around the world. Look at the Hollywood elite and Hugo Chavez. It's just they hate this country. They hate what this country represents. They get all indignant about what's happening in Georgia and turn a blind eye to abuse around the world. Now, speaking of abuses and blind eyes, when we come back, the Biden administration has announced a new policy to help farmers in trouble in the United States of America. They want to help farmers who have fallen on hard times, have gotten behind in debts. They want to help farmers who want to help get the government to pay back loans, but there's a problem. This government program that the Biden administration is pushing will not allow you to apply if you're white. That's right. They're embracing the anti-racism message of Ibram Kendi and telling white farmers they can't apply for a government program. All right. I realize there are a lot of stupid people on planet Earth. I realize people are stupid, but this has got to be a new low to the depths of stupidity out there. Last year in Georgia, Vernon Jones, a Democratic member of the state house, joined his Democratic colleagues in opposition to the fetal heartbeat legislation that would ban abortion when a fetal heartbeat is detected. And he told Republicans from the floor of the House of Representatives if they went down that road, they would be wiped out. The Democrats would be in charge. What they were doing was a bridge too far, and they would be punished by the voters for doing it. Now, as he suddenly found religion and Jesus and has declared himself pro-life from conception, he now says, well, actually, my opposition was because it didn't go far enough. So he opposed the fetal heartbeat legislation last year, saying Republicans would be punished for going too far. And this year says, they didn't actually go far enough. That's what it was. That's the ticket. And, of course, the island of Misfit Toys is like, yes, he's telling the truth now. Yes. Oh, these people are pathetic. Oh, my goodness gracious. Yeah, if I'm insulting you, yes, I intend to because you're a stupid person. Okay, we got to move on. This story is crazy. A group of white Midwestern farmers has filed a lawsuit against the Biden administration for racial discrimination over being banned from a loan forgiveness program offered only to farmers of color due to the fact they are ineligible solely due to their race. The Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty is representing the plaintiffs from Wisconsin, Minnesota, South Dakota, and Ohio in their suit against U.S. Secretary of Agriculture Tom Vilsack and Farm Service Agency Administrator Zach Deschanel. Their complaint argues that a loan program as part of the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 for socially disadvantaged farmers is unconstitutional because it is race-based. The Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel notes that the program pays up to 120% of direct or guaranteed farm loan balances for producers who are Black, Asian, American Indian or Alaska Native, Hispanic or Latino, and Asian American or Pacific Islander. White producers do not qualify. Were plaintiffs eligible for the loan forgiveness program, they would have had the opportunity to make additional investments in their property, expand their farms, purchase equipment and supplies, and otherwise support their families and local communities, the lawsuit read. Because plaintiffs are ineligible to even apply for the program solely due to their race, they have been denied the equal protection of the law and therefore suffered harm. The U.S. Department of Agriculture explains on its website the reasoning behind the program. USDA recognizes that socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers have faced systemic discrimination with cumulative effects that have, among other consequences, led to a substantial loss in the number of socially disadvantaged producers, reduced the amount of farmland they control, and contributed to a cycle of debt that was exacerbated during the COVID-19 pandemic. During the pandemic, socially disadvantaged communities saw a disproportionate amount of COVID-19 infection rates, loss of property, hospitalizations, death, and economic hurt. One of the plaintiffs in the suit is Adam Faust. Faust! A dairy farmer and double amputee. He told the Journal Sentinel there should absolutely be no federal dollars going anywhere just based on race. The economic impact from COVID-19 didn't hurt any race more than another as far as agriculture goes. The AP notes that minority farmers have maintained for decades that they have been unfairly denied farm loans and other government assistance, adding that the USDA in 1999 and 2010 settled lawsuits for black farmers, accusing the agency of discrimination against them. So reverse discrimination apparently is the rule of the day for the Biden administration. Biden admin goes all in on discrimination based on race. I'm tweeting it so you can see the article. This is, by the way, what the Ibram Kendis of the world want. Reverse discrimination. Punitive reverse discrimination. And the Biden administration is putting it in a law. Now, it's not constitutional. You need to understand that. It's not a constitutional thing that they can do, although you and I both know that Sonia Sotomayor will probably go along with it. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within their jurisdiction the equal protections of the law. This is the 14th Amendment, the very first preamble of the 14th Amendment. You can't discriminate. You cannot discriminate. You can't deny people their equal rights. You simply cannot do it. States cannot abridge the privileges and immunities of citizens or deny any person access to the rule of law. They simply cannot do it. And yet that's what they want to do. They've engaged in reverse discrimination. And their argument is that because white people were historically privileged, they were able to take advantage of the rule of law in ways that others can't. And therefore, it is time to do reverse discrimination. In San Diego, the San Diego County administrators are requiring that hundreds of staff go through race relations training, and the staff depicts the Republican Party as racist. More than 400 healthcare workers participated in a 3-day online critical race theory class that depicted the United States as a racist nation with white supremacy codified into our nation. The Washington Examiner reviewed the 82-slide PowerPoint presentation along with the contract that paid $25,050 to instructor Reginald Caldwell, described in the document as an experienced facilitator with expertise in this area. The presentation included a photograph of a recent rally where people were holding American flags and a sign that said Republicans United for Peace and Prosperity. The photo was placed next to an image of a KKK rally and underneath photos of racist Jim Crow era signs and a swath of Confederate flags. The 4 images were on the 3rd page in a series with headlines that said, "Racism started when the Puritans landed in America. Our founding fathers," and it continues and continues. Hans von Spakovsky, a Heritage Foundation senior legal fellow who worked on tort reform and civil justice issues in the private sector for more than a decade, told the Washington Examiner that the content was not only racist stereotyping, but may also have violated a federal law prohibiting engaging in political activity while on the job at a government entity. Apart from the absolutely horrendous racial stereotyping that this training is just completely full of, to the extent that any such training engages in partisan attacks, if they're getting federal funding, it's a violation of the Hatch Act. The Hatch Act prohibits on-the-job partisan expenditures and activities by federal employees or agencies, and by extension, municipalities that receive federal funding. The County of San Diego received hundreds of millions of dollars in federal health care funding on a continuing basis. This is a partisan activity. This training is full of racism, and they can't even get basic facts right. I'm shocked that this kind of racist stereotype training is being conducted. It's no different from the type of thing we were being taught in the 1920s. All they did was reverse the races. The county's training is a thinly veiled message that Republicans are bad. On one slide, it says white privilege in motherhood looks like being offered pain and medication, no one asking who the father is, and people not judging your financial status. Some slides made political statements such as Black Lives Matter and continued a photograph of a George Floyd memorial. Most, however, have statements such as Americans created an hierarchy with all whites at the top, or some variation. Here's a slide I'm looking at. Power and privilege. You need to be mindful about power and privilege in racial relations. Power is relational, contextual, and equitably distributed. Egalitarian relationships don't really exist. You got that? That's presuppositional that egalitarian relationships don't actually exist. So what happens when you reverse the power structures? You still don't get egalitarian relationships because they don't exist. What happens is the oppressor becomes the oppressed, and that's a good thing. Whiteness, the centrality of whiteness and the possession of white skin are assigned considerable power and privilege in our society. The degree of responsibility and accountability that one has to a relationship should be proportional to the relative degree of power and privilege one possesses and responsibility to a relationship. Critical reflection and self-interrogation are essential. White people, what are you willing to give up to have racial equity? Wait a second, you just said egalitarian relationships don't exist. And Black and indigenous people of color, BIPOC, what two you need? Wow, typo here. This is the actual slide. What two, not do, what two you need to gain, to experience racial equality? Again, the slide contemplates egalitarian relationships are impossible, don't really exist. This is the thing that you got to understand about all of this. According to critical theorists, you can never have equality because the world is based on balances of power, and one group will always have more power than the other. And as a result, what they want, their goal, what they strive for is to have the people who are dominant in society that they perceive to be dominant will soon become the people who are oppressed as payback. It's what Ibram Kendi advocates, reverse racial discrimination that is punitive so white people learn their lesson. And by the way, it's what rich white secular elites want, because rich white secular elites are really, really committed to the fact that you should not be able to compete with them. You should not be able to challenge them. And they know they'll be able to protect themselves by virtue of their money, and you won't be able to. Here's one more slide. What you say versus what I hear. Coded language for racism. It injects language that triggers racial stereotypes and other negative associations without the stigma of explicit racism. When you say maybe you shouldn't have been whatever, what I hear is the punishment of the alleged misdemeanor by a black person should not be execution by the police. When you say everyone just to shut up about George Floyd, I'm sick of it, what I hear is the murder of this man is less important than cat videos. When you say, I know it's sad, but these riots are appalling, what I hear is it doesn't matter if the rule of law has failed a significant portion of our population. We just need to remain docile. When you say don't play the race card, what I hear is since racism isn't happening to you, it's not real. When you say if there were riots here, I'd get my gun, what I hear is you fantasize about killing black people. I'm sorry, that's on you. That suggests you've got mental hangups, not me. If there's a riot through my neighborhood and they're burning houses, you damn right I'm going to get my gun and protect my property. Maybe don't riot. The fact that people get hypersensitive when you say stuff like this, that maybe George Floyd should not have been trying to pass off counterfeit money. Maybe he shouldn't have been. Daunte Wright, maybe he shouldn't have committed armed aggravated assault and tried to flee the police. In George Floyd's situation, it doesn't justify what happened to him. In Daunte Wright's situation, the cop screwed up. She's going to be punished for it. But he'd still be alive if he hadn't jumped in his car and tried to flee after struggling with the police. There are precursors to this stuff, and they want us to forget all about it. They want us to not talk about it. They want us to avoid it. You understand what's happening here, I hope. It's very much like the transgender agenda right now, that they don't want to have a reasonable conversation. They want to shut you up. They don't want you to point out inconvenient facts. You've got to shut up. It is an authoritarian ideology that makes you shut up and force you to comply, or else you get punished. That's it. They call Donald Trump the authoritarian, but I don't remember the last time anyone was punished in polite society for daring to speak up against Donald Trump. But I know lots of people who've been punished for daring to speak up against the wokes, because they're the real authoritarians here. I'm sorry. This is happening right now, and I'm just flabbergasted by it. I can't believe he did this. I cannot believe that he just did this. This was not a smart thing for him to do. Rudy Giuliani, the FBI raided his home, and this is one of those situations where I wanted to wait a bit to comment to see this thing play out. I think we should all be a bit perturbed when the administration of a president begins to send the FBI after his predecessor's advisors. Well, there's a problem. Rudy Giuliani on Twitter just destroyed that. I'm sitting here, I'm flabbergasted. Rudy Giuliani has just blown up the whole narrative. The narrative, the one that we should all be concerned about, is that the Biden administration has authorized the FBI to hound Rudy Giuliani, Biden predecessor's lawyer. We should actually all be concerned about that. Except Rudy Giuliani has now tweeted, the Department of Justice in late 2019 covertly obtained access to my iCloud account and never notified me. They invaded the attorney-client relationship as we were defending against the impeachment. The prosecutors violated the laws, not me. Who was president in 2019? Rudy Giuliani is conceding with this tweet. The Trump administration began the investigation into Rudy Giuliani. The Trump administration began the investigation into Rudy Giuliani. Bill Barr, Donald Trump's attorney general, authorized a warrant to get the iCloud information of Rudy Giuliani. It wasn't the Biden administration. So I've got a lot of friends of mine who have been deeply, deeply perturbed that the Biden administration is going after Rudy Giuliani, and you should be. That's what third world governments do. But now it turns out, based on Rudy Giuliani's own admission, it was his own client's administration. Rudy Giuliani is admitting today that it was Donald Trump's administration, his own client's administration, that began the investigation into him. That's nuts. That's nuts. That's the whole thing is nuts. That's just bizarre. That's just wow. So it was Bill Barr who authorized, because it would have to be Bill Barr. The Attorney General plays a direct role in authorizing warrants against people like that. He's not sheltered. He's not locked out. Okay. All right. Fine. So it was Bill Barr and the Trump administration who decided to investigate Rudy Giuliani. That's not a good look for Rudy. All right, we got to move on because there's another story out there you need to pay attention to. This weekend marks the 10th anniversary since Osama bin Laden, the mastermind of the September 11th attacks on the United States, was killed by U.S. Special Operations Forces. SEAL Team 6 inside his high-walled compound in the Pakistani military college city of Abbottabad. His name and that of his terrorist network, Al-Qaeda, came to define the end era of U.S. reaction and retribution, dwarfing any previous counterterrorism policy. America's war on terror is about to enter a new phase under Joe Biden as he withdraws troops from Afghanistan. However, in an exclusive interview with CNN conducted through intermediaries, two Al-Qaeda operatives tell CNN that war against the United States will be continuing on all other fronts unless they are expelled from the rest of the Islamic world. In the past, Al-Qaeda has rarely responded to questions, choosing instead to hide behind its own self-serving propaganda, dodging even the most distant scrutiny. It's unclear why the group has chosen to do so now. Terrorism analyst Paul Cruikshank, editor-in-chief of West Point CTC Sentinel, who reviewed Al-Qaeda's answer, says it is possible they feel buoyed by the Biden administration's decision to pull out troops from Afghanistan, but they may be also seeking to deflect attention from their many recent losses. The reality here is that Al-Qaeda is kind of a non-starter these days. We've pretty much wiped them out. ISIS has become a bigger threat than Al-Qaeda, and even ISIS has been pretty well damaged. I guess they're looking for relevance here. But the fact that, Al-Qaeda has reared its head, maybe we should stay in Afghanistan. Maybe they want to keep us in Afghanistan so they can keep taking shots at our troops. There's no reason. It's time for us to come home. This is the one thing the Biden administration has gotten right. After 20 years, it is time to bring our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, bring them all home. Get us out of Afghanistan. When we come back, J.D. Vance is in hot water with the left for daring to talk about daycare, of all things. Greetings, welcome, it's Friday. Aren't you happy about that? It's Eric Erickson here across the nation. The phone number, 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Y'all, I'm going to wade fearfully into territory where I know, because I've gone down this road before, what the reaction is going to be. People are very sensitive about this one, and I got to think part of it is guilt. Nobody wants to admit that it's guilt, but I think part of it has to be guilt. J.D. Vance is running for Congress, or for the Senate, it seems. He's the author of Hillbilly Elegy. He's running as a Trump-style populist candidate. He had been a Democrat. Now running, he's kind of been a big spending populist Democrat in the past, now turned Republican, as Ohio has turned, and he's getting into politics. Well, let me play you this audio.
Well, I think it tells you that they care much more about the preferences of our ruling class elites than they do about the preferences of middle class Americans. If you look at poll after poll, it shows that the ruling class family model is just different from what middle class Americans want. The ruling class is obsessed with their jobs. Even though they hate a lot of their jobs, they're obsessed with their credentials, and they want strangers to raise their kids. But middle class Americans, whatever their station in life, they want more time with their children, even if they're working. They want the opportunity to spend more time with their kids and not be forced to send them to daycare. And so what this policy really represents is an effort to subsidize the preference of our ruling class over the preference of our middle and working classes. And what's so troubling about this is it doesn't have to be like that. Tucker, you know that I'm a big fan of providing support to parents because I want there to be more children. I want American families to prosper. We could just do that, and then the parents could choose to send their kids to daycare if they wanted, but they could also choose to spend more time at home with their children, as most normal Americans actually want.
He's under fire for suggesting that universal daycare coverage as proposed by the Biden administration is for the elite. And you know he's not really wrong. I know I have to tread lightly here. I do. Because I've gone down this path before, and the intense, critical, negative reaction is always amazing to me. But the reality is this. Kids benefit by having one parent who stays home. What I find remarkable by saying that statement is that immediately a crowd of angry women descends. Well, it's not going to be the man, is it? That's on you and him. I just said kids benefit by having one parent stay home. My family is somewhat unique in that I work from home. My wife stays home. My wife didn't always stay home. We had our kids in daycare, and we ultimately decided it was better for us to make the sacrifices we needed to make so that my wife could stay home, one, because of her health, and two, because it's best for the kids. So I had to get a second job. And I did. And now I'm very blessed, but I mean, I bust my butt. Y'all don't understand. Well, maybe some of you do. You know, it's kind of funny. I think the listeners understand more than some people in radio understand. Talking for 6 straight hours, which is what I do. I start this program at 9 a.m. and I am done at 3 p.m. I do in this show, almost more than half of my affiliates now are running this show noon to 3. And so I do a 9 to noon show. Most of you take noon to 3. And then I do a local show in Atlanta that is noon to 3. 6 nonstop hours of radio. And it's exhausting. And, you know, with this show, I don't actually get paid. I get paid well enough in the other show, and my plan, I've made no secret with you guys about it. I'm not going to, is to merge them into one show. As we continue to spread, we've started getting stations out of state now, out of Georgia, with this show. They're already running us noon to 3. So you can just guess where my trajectory lies on that. But I am the sole breadwinner in the family. We made a conscious choice years ago to do that, and I worked hard. And I make no apologies for it. I worked multiple jobs so that my wife could stay home, and not everyone can. But I also know a lot of people who it's their choice because they want the big house and the nice cars and the lifestyle that comes from 2 incomes. So they haven't. I've got a friend of mine. He was talking to me yesterday. He heard me talking about this on the other show. And he said his car, he bought used. It's from the 1990s. It has 300,000 miles on it. And it's what he drives. And he's been saving to get a new used vehicle. They live in a small house. And his wife stays home with the kids. And they go to a small private Christian school, and they go to school with people who are way more wealthy, and their kids sometimes get mad at the parents, and they know it because they don't have the means and access and ability and income to do what other people do because his wife stays home. And now that all of the kids are now in school all day, his wife's looking at getting a part-time job during the day while the kids are out of the house. And even then, they're not sure they want to do it because she's really enjoyed going to school and being there with the school and volunteering with the kids. And he says, it's hard. It's really, really hard. And he kind of resents the people who get angry and reject the idea that maybe one parent should stay home, because he says people don't appreciate the sacrifice they're making. And then he's got a lot of friends like, well, I mean, it's your choice. He says, yeah, it's our choice because we think our kids would be benefited from it. And sociologically, psychologically, demographically, economically, it's true. And people are outraged at J.D. Vance for pointing out that situation, that when you say we're going to fund universal daycare for everyone, what you're doing is you're saying we want to give a preference to people. And I wouldn't go as far as he would with elite, because there are a lot of people who aren't elite who are doing it, and a lot of people who've they've gotten themselves in debt. They haven't done the Dave Ramsey model. My wife and I have struggled with doing the Dave Ramsey thing ourselves. But it's also true, you know. And you can rage against me or J.D. Vance or someone else for pointing out, but it actually is true. There are ample studies that show kids benefit from having a parent at home, and it doesn't have to be the mom. I've got a friend who's a stay-at-home dad because his wife makes 3 times as much money as him. And oftentimes what you find out is that one of the incomes is going to cover the cost of daycare anyway. So the Biden administration wants to cover the cost of daycare. But you know what's so remarkable to me is there have been a number of educators who have responded to J.D. Vance essentially saying that, well, what he misses is that parents aren't capable of educating their children for the 21st century in the way that we are. If you're wondering what that tone is, I'm on my wife's computer because my keyboard broke and I still can't figure out how to turn all the sounds off. But do you get me with this educator? What this educator is saying is that essentially parents can't be trusted to raise their kids at home. That's actually what this educator, as a pre-K, something, she's a doctor with a PhD, as some sort of pre-kindergarten child developmental expert. She favors universal daycare because parents can't really raise their children for the 21st century in the way a trained professional in a daycare can. Really? That's your line and you're sticking to it? That parents are worse than a surrogate parent in a daycare to raise a kid? Really? That's what you're going to go with? Because, economically, demographically, psychologically, sociologically, all of the studies beg to differ with this person. Not everybody can do it. I don't mind telling you. He wouldn't mind me telling you. Dick Cheney, one time, I had lunch with him when he was vice president. And we were talking about this because I was struggling at the time, really. And I still do. Men tend to be defined by their careers. Let's just be honest. Eternity will define me by my children. I define myself by my job. Men are like that. And Cheney was talking to me about how do I balance it? Because at the time I was doing radio, I was doing TV, I was doing redstate.com. I mean, I had 3 paychecks coming in, taking care of the family. I was hustling. I was flying all over the world, constantly gone. And he was asking me about that. And I was telling him, it's just, there's always so much. There's always so much. And he said that what he discovered, there were a lot of people, he said, who told him you got to spend X number of minutes a day with your kids and your wife. And he said what he came to realize over time was it wasn't the quantity, but the quality. That if you can only spend an hour with your kids, spend that hour, but turn off everything. At the time, it was the BlackBerry. Turn it all off. And I got to admit, I'm really bad about that. I'm addicted to my screens. I'm addicted to the information pull. I'm addicted to the push messaging. I'm addicted. And I got to work on that. Still, my kids are 12 and 15, but I try to spend time with them, try to spend time with my wife, and I'm bad. I mean, I'm self-admitted here. I'm bad at it. But I do all the income earning in our house so that my wife can be there with the kids. I don't care whether it's the wife or the husband, and I'm not trying to guilt you. Don't hear me do that. What I am trying to note, though, is there's this massive level of outrage from people at J.D. Vance, and then I agreed with him and pointed out all the studies show he's right, and people are mad at me for pointing out he's right, but he is right. I mean, he genuinely, truly is right in what he said, that the families benefit by having a parent stay home, and it doesn't have to be the mom, it can be the dad. And that it is a lot of times what the elite in this country do is they decide everyone else should be able to live like them. So let's move from daycare. Let's take drugs. The elite in this country tend to have a casual relationship with illegal narcotics. I'm stunned at the number of professionals I've encountered in the news media who are pretty open about their cocaine use. Or marijuana. Or pills. And it translates down into society. What happens? The bottom of society doesn't have the means to go to rehab or to keep it all together, or the job that allows them to get high on the job, and they collapse around themselves. My goodness, we got a McDonald's near me. It's the one. So Philip, y'all have heard the story. Philip, who does the digital for me, went to this McDonald's and ordered a bacon cheeseburger, which is the bacon and cheese. He expected to get a hamburger that just had bacon and cheese on it. Instead, he got 2 buns with 2 slices of cheese and 2 pieces of bacon. There was no burger. That McDonald's, I've gone by there a couple of times, and I've used the app, and they get the order wrong every single time. Even when I use the app of late, they've gotten the order wrong. And you go by there, and the employees they've got this gated, walled place where the dumpsters are, and you can go by there, and you can see the clouds of marijuana coming out. Same, we had a Dairy Queen. They just fired. I'm sure all the people who work at the McDonald's were at the Dairy Queen where they just fired them all. The workers were standing out back. You literally could go through the drive-thru and buy drugs with your Blizzard because they were standing out there smoking weed and selling it. And the orders were always wrong, and you stunk. If you're a corporate executive of the New York Times and you're snorting cocaine in the bathroom or what, you're more likely to have a little measure of protection than the guy at the drive-thru. You're living a sexually promiscuous lifestyle, and you've got the money to either pay for the abortions or handle the illegitimate kids in a way that someone at the lower rungs of society don't. If you're at the upper rungs of society and you got 2 people making high-income earners, you're perfectly fine passing your kids off to a nanny, a surrogate, an au pair, or a daycare to raise your kid and not have a relationship with them. Now, your kid's going to be screwed up. Your kid is totally going to be screwed up, but you don't care, because your priorities are defined by something other than your kids. Most people want to be defined by their kids. And for the government to embrace the elite agenda here, J.D. Vance is right about. I may not agree with him on everything, but he's right about this. The government embraces an elite agenda that rich people can afford and decides, hey, we're now going to use the government to let everybody else do this lifestyle as well. Well, what they don't want to pay attention to is it's not working for the rich and the elite. Their kids are porn-addicted drug addicts going to college and having to use networks of friends to get good jobs that they're ultimately going to crash and burn out of and go to rehab. And the rest of us, our kids, they can't afford that lifestyle, and we shouldn't want it for them either. Simply delighted to have you with me. Welcome. It's Eric Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Have you gotten your Eden Pure Thunderstorm yet? I'm hearing from more of you that you are, and y'all are impressed. We've now had multiple people email the show and say they got one and then they got another. We had one person who told me they ordered one for their house. They kept forgetting to take it with them, so they got one for their RV. It's great. The Eden Pure Thunderstorm it's a handheld air purifier. There's no filter to change. It takes away the odors. It takes away the mildew from the air. It takes away the pollen. There's no filters to replace. You can use it with a USB plug. You can plug it into the wall. It just works. So useful. And right now, if you go to EdenPureDeals.com, that's the Garden of Eden, EdenPureDeals.com, and you use my name, Eric, E-R-I-C-K, at checkout, you will be able to get a $10 off their lowest sale price. So you get their lowest sale price and then $10 off of that, and you get your Eden Pure Thunderstorm. And it really is great. It can generate ozone. It can take the odor out of your air. The multiple people. So the guy who emailed me the other day and said he went and got another one, he got one for his RV because he said he heard me talking about the campfire stuff. They go out, they do a lot of camping. They don't pitch tents. They've got their RV, and they do campfires and stuff, and they're always stinky afterwards. And he says it's great. It takes that out of the air and inside the RV. So go to EdenPureDeals.com and order one today. You'll get $10 off the lowest sales price if you use my name, Eric, at checkout. Now, to the phones, I'm going to go to Jim in Decatur. Welcome, Jim.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, I'm glad J.D. Vance said what he said. I mean, that's something that's overdue. But I'm especially glad that he said it right on the heels of Senator Scott's talk about all of the single parents who really do above and beyond the call of duty and just knock themselves out. And I think that's one of those things that gets lost into it, particularly with moms give themselves way too much guilt to start with. And and I know they it sets their hair on fire thinking that they're somebody out there somewhere thinks they might be harming their children, which they certainly aren't. Yes, the kids have gone through divorce, and that's a very tough thing. But and that is a kind of the two sides to the one coin of talking about child care, daycare, and that sort of thing. That we've got to reassure all the single parents that they really do a great job. And believe me, years ago I dated a couple of moms, and they just knocked themselves out. But they were also very conscious of just they were having to do their work alone, but at home they were pretty much alone trying to raise their children. And
I think that's a really good point, because there is a lot of guilt out there for a lot of them. Now, I got to tell you, I know somewhere there's not, but most of them, overwhelmingly, yes, there is a lot of guilt.
So I like both Senator Scott and J.D. Vance's point, and just always want to remember to take those together and always reassure the backbreaking parents, but also call out the others who are just sort of like, I want somebody else to raise my kids. That's not good.
We need people to not be having others raise their kids if they can help it. Jim, thanks very much for that. I very much do appreciate it. Well said. I don't have time to okay. Those of you on hold, stay on hold, because I've got 30 seconds basically, so I can't get to you, but I will when we come back from our 5-minute timeout here, where we try to make money and let stations make money. Coming up, more phone calls, and then we got to get into the new data on the Christian left. Guess what? Turns out they're the ones who are hyper political, and they are spitting mad at an actual really good credible study from a credible source that dares to point it out. Well, this is what happens. You get a break and people hang up. That's fine. I need to talk about the NFL draft. I mean, it was obvious Trevor Lawrence was going to be the first pick. I don't know what happened with the Atlanta Falcons. I don't know what this team is thinking. It's like someone who's in charge of the Falcons has insisted that they must continue a losing streak. Like it would be bad for them if they somehow won. I don't get it. I don't understand it. It's just, it baffles me what they do. But Trevor Lawrence, of course, from Cartersville, Georgia, is now headed to Jacksonville. He was the most sought after. I mean, people have been dying to get this guy into the NFL draft. But Jim Garrity over at National Review has a piece. Remember Michael Sam? For a few months in 2000.